Today we wander with St. Margaret of Scotland. Her feast day is November 16th. She is the patron saint of Scotland, widows, and pregnant women. In the year 1066, William the Conqueror invaded England, won the Battle of Hastings, and became king. It became clear that the English court was no longer a safe place for the young Princess Margaret. She was just 22. With her mother, she'd been brought to England 10 years earlier and had grown up in the court of the kindly King Edward, known as Edward the Confessor because of his holiness. But he had died, his son had been killed, and the new King William didn't want anyone around who'd been connected with that family. So before he could harm the princess, her mother decided they must escape. But where would they go? France was out of the question. William ruled there as well. The answer seemed to be Scotland. They went by sea. It wasn't good weather, but at last they arrived safely. King Malcolm of Scotland welcomed them. After all, he knew what it was like to be a royal refugee. Some years earlier, he'd had to flee for his life when his own father, King Duncan, had been murdered by a man named Macbeth. But he had not only welcomed the beautiful princess, he fell in love with her, and they were married 3 years later. Now, it has to be said, they were an odd couple. She was quiet, holy, prayerful, kind, and generous. He was different. To be blunt, he was noisy, rough, rude, and fond of war. And his palace where they lived at Dunfermline was grim, bleak, and cold. Margaret set about changing her husband, his palace, and the country. She helped him control his temper. She brought bright hangings and tapestries to the castle, and she brought books. In particular, she had a beautiful illustrated copy of the Gospels, but she never managed to teach Malcolm to read. She did, however, persuade him that the books were important, and he would kiss the Bible to show he respected it. Gradually, she made the court more beautiful and refined. The courtiers began to join her at her prayers. Every day, she opened the palace doors to the sick and the poor, and personally gave food to those in need. 24 people lived entirely at her expense. And when she journeyed around Scotland, she carried money to give to those who were hungry. If she ran out of money, she used Malcolm's. He learned not to notice when this happened. But all was not well between Scotland and England. The two countries began fighting each other, and during this war Malcolm was killed. So too was their eldest son. At the same time, Margaret had become ill. When a younger son returned from the battle, she asked him how they were. So as not to worry her, he said they were well. She replied, "I know how it is." 4 days later, she prayed to God, "Let me be free." Then she died.